one of the things that I've observed, and we've been on these conversations together in some cases where people were like, I just sleepwalked into this life where I thought nothing of getting on a plane and going to Singapore for a 3-hour talk and flying back again. Some of us had a little contest going around, like, what was the most ridiculous thing you did, like for a one-shot thing? And I wonder how that's all going to change. I really think I'm hearing from so many people, like, why did I waste so many precious breaths in airport lounges? Which is a high class problem to have on the one hand, but on the other, it's like, why did I just assume this was normal and that was a really good way to live my life?
Yeah, I speak for a living. Speaking is 80% of my revenue, so I have had to pay close attention to these matters, and I've been delighted that my speaking career has managed to still thrive via Zoom, which takes so much effort to connect with people through this webcam. You work hard at it. I work hard at it.
Totally.
But audiences come like, hey, we'll listen to you, even though it's all virtual. But I've also learned in this year, Rita, that being in my house is wonderful. I've been in a 33-year relationship with a dude I met in college. He's called my husband. And I have loved being in my house and seeing him every day. And my 2 kids have been back, and I'm trying to figure out, what does this mean for me professionally? Might I need to develop some different sources of revenue so that I don't have to get on planes constantly and be in cities for 3 hours or 3 days in order to to earn the income I'm trying to earn. So it's woken me up for sure to what I want. And I think I thought the traveling was glamorous, and I certainly love being with people.
Yeah.
I think if I could magically get to be with humans in person without all the time associated with travel and hotels and all of that, I would do that in an instant. Unfortunately, we're not technologically advanced enough yet to just transport to another.
I can highly recommend. I did a holographic thing, and it really worked. I could see the audience; they could see me, and I was beamed into Hong Kong, and I was in New York.
That's amazing. I said, "Holy moly, that's amazing!"
It was great.
That. Okay.
The only thing I would warn you about, it was my morning. It was like 6 a.m. for me, and it was their evening, and they all got to go off and have cocktails, and I had to go work. That was a bummer.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about one of the sections in the book, which is called How to Cope. And we've got some questions in the chat from folks who are kind of curious about when you hit those difficult moments, like what are the things that really helped you get through it? And you've got a chapter specifically calling out 12 steps to surviving. And I'll leave the rest of the sentence unsaid, but when something really bad happens, right?
Okay, yes. I was wondering, are we not allowed to swear on your podcast?
Oh, you're allowed. You're totally allowed.
I'm allowed. The chapter is that, folks, back at home. The chapter is called How to Cope When the Shit Hits the Fan. And it's in a book on adulting because the shit will hit the fan. This chapter, and throughout the book, I'm trying to make the point that much is out of your control. Chaos is normal. All that you can really be in control of, in charge of, is yourself if you work hard at it. And I will explain mindfulness, and I will explain self-awareness and self-love, and these various things that we can get better at in order to be more in charge of our own actions and reactions. This chapter is saying, how will you be when the bad stuff happens? And I think the short answer to your question is, Rita, humans. Humans are key to our survival, which is a point I make in the earlier chapter about relationships. And it is humans whom you need to count on in times of crisis. The epigraph of that chapter is Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, that many of us know of from our childhood, who said, look for the helpers. And the point is, when you are in trouble, you've got to find those humans around you, whether it's a car crash or cancer diagnosis, a natural disaster. You find yourself having done something terrible and you're being held accountable. I mean, sometimes the disaster is of our own making, and I acknowledge that too. We've got a set of humans around us, we hope, who love us no matter what, and will show up for us in our times of need, expecting reciprocity there. Of course, we are a mutually interdependent species, and there's nothing like a crisis to remind us that humans are everything. And so I try to tell, you've alluded to the fact that I have a lot of vulnerable narrative in this book. I am a memoirist. I believe in trying to tell the truth of our lived experience to the extent we can bear it, to help other humans feel seen and less alone and more supported. So in this chapter, I do a deep exploration in memoir of a series of years from when I was age 20 to 26, when I survived a pretty scary earthquake experience here in California. My father got a cancer diagnosis. I enrolled at Harvard Law School. I get married. I find out my brother is dying and dies within 2 months of that. My father then dies. I've started work at a law firm, and I'm taken out to lunch and told by the partners at my law firm that I need to get my hours up. And I go to grief counseling for the first time, having gone through these things, which I had just ignored, put blinders on. I'm fine. I'm high achieving. Look at me. I'm amazing, while just fragile and hollow inside. I go to grief counseling in a group session held by Cara Group Grief Counseling here in Palo Alto. And I meet a guy named Thane, a white gay guy who's like 8 years older than me, but we're the youngest in the group. Everyone else is in their 50s and 60s. We're in our 20s and 30s. And he and I become this lifeline for one another. He's just lost his mother. I've lost my father. That is my most recent acute loss, but I've got this stacked up set of fears that I'm still. And Thane became this friend in therapy, who was my lifeline, my blanket. And Thane and I have rarely met socially, Rita, over these decades. But Thane will show up on Facebook when something good happens in my life. Thane will post, "Your father would be so proud."
Oh.
And that brings tears to my eyes just retelling it to you, right? Thane and I, when you go through a challenging, emotional, gut-wrenching experience with somebody, or you're unpacking loss with somebody, you know each other at the molecular level of care, and that never goes away. Never. And Thane and I are that mutual thing for each other. And anyway, so I'm trying to illustrate in that chapter that how essential and transformative one great human relationship can be when you're struggling. We don't need a village. I mean, villages are important for other reasons, but when we're suffering, when we're struggling, one or two people who we know care deeply will make all the difference. And we need to, of course, show up and be that person as appropriate.